The average NBA team rakes in over $400 million a year, and the league itself is worth more than $150 billion. It's a global spectacle, one that prints cash, dominates TV ratings, and sells out arenas from New York to Shanghai. However, there was a time when owning an NBA team wasn't a dream. It was a burden. Paychecks bounced. Crowds barely filled half the seats. Most franchises were losing money, and the NBA Finals aired after the local news, buried after midnight, because advertisers didn't think basketball was worth prime time. The headlines were worse. Drug scandals, empty arenas, a league that looked more chaotic than credible. No one could have imagined it would survive, let alone dominate. But today, that same league is a billionaire's playground. Franchises sell for over $5 billion, and the game built on passion now runs on profit. From broke arena owners struggling to fill seats to Wall Street funds quietly buying slices of the game itself, this is how basketball became business and how the NBA turned from a struggling league into a multi-billion-dollar empire. At the start, pro basketball wasn't a dream. It was a solution to a big problem. On off days, arenas had rows of empty seats, and Tuesday nights no one wanted. So a handful of arena bosses asked a simple question. What if we turned dead nights into a show? Because the Boston Garden still had rent to pay, and Madison Square Garden hated silence. Therefore, on June 6, 1946, they formed the BBA, a schedule filler with hoops. But filling a calendar isn't the same as building a business, so the first owners had to improvise. They came in three stripes, arena men like Walter A. Brown in Boston and Ned Irish in New York. They owned the stage. Therefore, they could engineer the gate, stack double headers, pair hoops with other acts, and feed crowds from one event into the next. Next, there were industrialists like Fred Zollner, who made pistons, hence the name Detroit Pistons. The team was a billboard for his factory, but when the league wobbled, he fronted money, transportation, and staff to keep it alive. Because if the schedule died, his billboard did too. Then there were showmen like Ben Berger and Morris Chalfin of the Minneapolis Lakers, ticket sellers who knew entertainment beats philosophy. A seat ran 75 cents to $2.50. In the inaugural season, the league drew about 1 million fans, roughly 3,100 per game. At those modern equivalents, that's about 83,000 per game, and $5 million across a season, but only before the arena cut taxes and travel. The BAA set a team salary cap of $55,000, which is about $908,180 today. Most players earn $4 to $5K, about $55K to $75K. The true stars hit $15K to $20K, or almost $190K to $250K when adjusted for inflation. So if audience dipped, you felt it by payday. Some clubs even missed payroll. Walter Brown mortgaged assets to keep the Celtics going. The Toronto Huskies reportedly had a major loss. When adjusted for inflation, they lost about $1.3 million in a single 1946-47 season. What about early media money? Just a trickle. The first national TV package, Dumont, brought roughly $39,000 for 13 games. Because national TV checks were tiny, owners leaned into local radio. In those early years, the New York Knicks pulled in about $250 per game on radio nights, roughly $4,100 today when adjusted for inflation. By the end of the decade, that number climbed to around $1,750 per game, or nearly $29,000 in today's money. Not a windfall, but steady, dependable, and loud. Then a business fix disguised as a rule. Danny Biassone's 24-second shot clock. It killed stall ball and jolted scoring. Thus, the product became sellable again. Pace, shots, and more reasons to buy a ticket. Let's talk numbers, because this wasn't basketball glory yet. This was survival math. On a good night in the late 1940s, a team might sell 90,000 tickets across a season, averaging about $1.50 each. That's roughly $135,000 in total revenue, or $2.2 million in today's money, before the arena took its share. If you were lucky enough to own your own building, total revenue could climb closer to $140,000 to $170,000, roughly $1.8 to $2.2 million today. But against $80,000 to $110,000 in cash costs, payroll, travel, staff, the outcome was brutally simple. Break even if you sold out. Bleed money if you didn't. The league began with 11 teams in 1946, merged with the NBL in 1949 to make it 17, and by 1955, only 8 survived. It wasn't a scandal that wiped them out, it was the numbers. Only the owners with buildings to fill, cash to float payroll, and the showman's instinct to sell a slow Tuesday night made it through. For every fan cheering courtside, there were 10 silent accountants in the back office asking the same question: can we even make it to next week? Because someone still had to prove that a team, any team, could be consistently profitable. Before billionaires bought basketball teams for bragging rights, owning one was a gamble, normally a terrible one. Most owners lost money, but one hustler from Buffalo, New York, rewrote the playbook. His name was Ben Kerner. He wasn't the first person to profit in basketball, but he was the first one to make it look repeatable. Born in Poland in 1930 and raised in Buffalo, Kerner went to Canisius College and the University of Buffalo, but school wasn't the goal. He wasn't chasing grades, he was chasing opportunity. By the early 1940s, Kerner was running a tiny sports promotion firm. Not glamorous, just crucial, because it taught him one principle he never forgot. If you can sell tickets, you can build an empire. In 1946, he teamed with Leo Ferris to launch a pro basketball team in Buffalo. No one showed up, so he moved the team to the Tri-Cities, then Milwaukee, each time losing money, sometimes just a few thousand short of making payroll. Failure didn't break him, it trained him. He learned that in early basketball, location beat loyalty every time. So when the league reshuffled in 1955, Kerner rolled the dice again, this time on St. Louis, and everything changed. St. Louis wasn't a mega market. The Kiel Auditorium held only 9,300 fans, but Kerner didn't see small. He saw leverage. He treated basketball like a full-time business. He told reporters, "Basketball is my only business," and he ran it that way. He packed Kiel with anything that worked: post-game dances, tennis exhibitions, big band nights. His rule? Give the people more than just a place to go. He made the Hawks one of the league's first entertainment brands. Every home game hit radio, many hit TV. He even landed a beer sponsor, Busch Bavarian, and also ran 3 year-round radio shows for himself, his coach, and his star, Bob Pettit. Players became community ambassadors, clinics, charity events, appearances. He even created season ticket payment plans, letting blue-collar families buy in. Because Kerner wasn't selling basketball, he was selling belonging, and it worked. By the late 1950s, the Hawks averaged 8,500 fans a night, nearly full capacity. With an average ticket around $2.50, Kerner pulled in roughly $21,000 per home game, or about $1.2 million a season from the gate. Add TV, radio, and sponsors, and revenue hit nearly $1.5 million a year. By 1962, reports showed Kerner had cleared over $1 million in profit, unheard of in an era where most teams were drowning. On the court, he built around Bob Pettit, the league's first 2,000-point scorer, plus Cliff Hagan and Clyde Lovelett. In 1958, the Hawks beat the mighty Celtics for their first and only championship. Kerner proved that winning sells, but marketing keeps you rich. But eventually, Kiel held him back. No suites, limited concessions, no public funding for a new arena. Growth stalled. So in 1968, after 2 decades in the game, Kerner sold the Hawks to a group in Atlanta, walking away with a small fortune and a permanent place in sports business history. Then Kerner started as a traveling promoter and became one of the NBA's first millionaire owners made by basketball itself. He built the league's first reliable blueprint for profit, community, showmanship, and business, a formula that quietly predicted the billion-dollar franchises to come. By the late 60s and 70s, pro basketball was wobbling. Teams folded, paychecks bounced. Even championship games couldn't fill small gyms. The league Ben Kerner helped legitimize was bleeding red ink. By 1980-81, 16 of the 23 teams lost money. Average attendance barely topped 10,000 a game. League-wide losses hit around $17 million. Owners cut costs, delayed bills, and prayed for gate spikes. Then the ABA crashed the party in 1967 with three-pointers, dunk contests, and bigger paychecks. Players' salaries exploded, and the NBA had to match them. Because if you can't keep your stars, you can't sell your nights. Costs surged. Margins vanished. The lesson was brutal but simple. This wasn't just sport anymore. It was show business. The ABA's flash exposed the NBA's weakness. It wasn't built for entertainment. In response, the league began centralizing power, pooling media rights, and trying to look like a single national brand. But the product had another issue: trust. In the late 70s came whispers of the cocaine era. It wasn't an exaggeration. Drug use had crept into locker rooms and road trips. Players were suspended, careers imploded, and sponsors panicked. TV partners hesitated. The league's credibility hung by a thread. Then came the violence. Fights broke out on live television, most infamously when Kermit Washington's 1977 punch shattered Rudy Tomjanovich's skull so badly that Rudy said he could taste his own spinal fluid. It was the moment the NBA's volatility turned horrifyingly real. To corporate America, the league didn't look like a product, it looked like a problem. Inside ownership circles, the mood was grim. One owner supposedly joked that an NBA franchise was worth less than a Manhattan townhouse. Trophies on the shelf, but no buyers at the door. When the product looks tarnished, even winning can't sell it. So the league went to war on its own image. Referees got more authority. Fines rose. Automatic suspensions for fighting. And in 1983, the NBA and Players Union created a sweeping anti-drug program. Counseling and treatment first, but a lifetime ban on a third strike. 3 years later, All-Star Michael Ray Richardson was banned for life. Proof the policy had teeth. Because in business, credibility sells. As the image slowly cleaned up, the league now needed a reason for America to care again. Then came a miracle: Magic versus Bird, 1979. A rivalry that turned basketball into a story. Lakers versus Celtics became national theater. Attendance climbed, sponsors returned, and TV ratings followed. But the league still needed someone to turn attention into a system. In 1984, David Stern took over, a lawyer who saw basketball as intellectual property. He centralized rights, marketed players like brands, and built NBA entertainment to package highlights and storytelling. The proof was in the contracts. The 1982-86 CBS deal was just $91.9 million total, about $23 million a year. By 1986, renewals jumped to $173 million over 4 years on CBS, plus $25 million on TBS, the first real turning point. The flywheel spun. Better image, more viewers, bigger TV checks, stronger balance sheets. By 1987-88, Stern said 21 of 23 teams were profitable. The NBA had finally turned the corner, from a patchwork of local promoters to a national entertainment company. Kerner once sold nights with big band dances. Stern sold nights with narratives. By the mid-1980s, what once looked doomed was suddenly thriving. After years of empty seats and near bankruptcy, the NBA had finally become a business worth buying into. David Stern's reforms worked. Image rehab, TV money, and the rise of cultural icons. For the first time in decades, owners saw black ink instead of red. So a new question emerged. If the league is thriving, why not make it bigger? Investors lined up at the NBA's door, checkbooks ready. They weren't chasing basketball dreams, they were chasing the next great American asset class. But joining the NBA wasn't simple. It was an invitation-only club. You had to be voted in. Applications came with market studies, arena plans, and proof you could survive early losses. Then finance and strategy committees dissected every number before the owners took a vote. Approval required a 3/4 majority. Then came the price of admission, the expansion fee, a one-time payment that went straight to existing owners. Basically, expansion meant two things: a quick payday for the veterans at the table and a long-term bet on the league's future. Behind the glamour sat the math. New teams began with ownership equity to cover the fee and first payrolls, then mixed public and private funds for arenas. They also needed deep credit lines to survive early losses, because expansion teams rarely win on the court or the balance sheet, at least not right away. Once approved, new teams got a head start. An expansion draft of unprotected players, minor salary cap breaks, and phased revenue rules. It was like starting a marathon from mile 2 instead of mile 1. Not easy, but survivable if you ran it like a business, not a fan club. By the late 80s, the NBA added 4 teams in 4 cities, each cutting a $32.5 million check. In Charlotte, entrepreneur George Shinn built a 24,000-seat arena and capped season tickets to create scarcity. The result? 36 sellouts in year 1 and about $415,000 in ticket sales per game. A gate miracle. In Miami, Ted Arison and Zev Buffman mixed cruise line capital with show business polish, treating the team like a startup. In Minnesota, optimism met over leverage. Arena debt ballooned into the decade's cautionary tale. And in Orlando, Pat Williams sold Family First basketball to a booming Sunbelt, and it clicked. Charlotte, Miami, Orlando all proved expansion could profit from day one, so the NBA looked north. In 1995, expansion went global. Toronto and Vancouver. The buy-in was $125 million each, $65 million up front, the rest financed. Proof of how valuable the NBA brand had become. Both faced restrictions under the 1995 collective bargaining agreement, a softened salary cap, and a 3-year ban on the number 1 draft pick. Toronto's corporate backing through John Bitovi and Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment gave it staying power, so by the 2000s, it was a global success. However, in Vancouver, the math collapsed. Revenue in Canadian dollars, payroll in US, exchange rates sinking. Losses hit $40 million a year. By the early 2000s, the franchise moved south to Memphis. In another relocation, when the Hornets left for New Orleans in 2002, Charlotte wanted back in. 2 years later, it got a new team, the Bobcats, and a new bill. The entry fee wasn't $32 million anymore. It was $300 million. The league had changed. National TV money exploded. Corporate sponsors lined up. Local partnerships deepened. What once took years to reach profitability now could work from day one. Each new team wasn't just another roster. It was another market, asset, and cash stream inside a growing empire. By the 2000s, expansion wasn't about survival anymore. It was about scale. The next frontier wouldn't be new arenas. It would be new continents. The NBA wasn't just growing. It was going global. By the early 2000s, the NBA wasn't fighting for survival anymore. It was fighting for scale. The league that once begged for fans in half-empty gyms was now selling out in arenas coast to coast. For the first time, owners weren't asking, how do we stay alive? But how do we grow? Revenues climbed about 5% a year. Attendance was strong. New arenas gleamed like luxury resorts. But beneath the shine, profits told a different story. Big market teams like the Lakers, Knicks, and Bulls were printing tens of millions, while smaller markets barely broke even. The league had grown, but it hadn't matured. Then came the stumbles. In 2004, one brawl in Detroit, the Malice at the Palace, sent shockwaves through sponsors and networks. Security tightened. Rules changed. The NBA learned a brutal truth. One night of chaos could cost millions in credibility. 3 years later came the Tim Donaghy scandal. A referee caught betting on games. The FBI stepped in. Trust collapsed, and Commissioner David Stern launched an independent review. The Pedowitz Report. It rebuilt the NBA's ethics